when they realize that consumers are not happy with that, are going to be willing to go back to real people.
Well, can these companies improve customer service fast enough to make up for the customer service people they lay off?
It's a great question. And the answer so far, I think historically has been no. And a big part of that is because we, on the consumer side, are not satisfied dealing with phone trees and computers and that sort of thing. And these agents are essentially that. We want human contact. We want, people to work with. And I just wonder if we're not, you know, going to see a bit of a backlash as AI starts to take over some of these back end functions.
Hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider Podcast. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm well, Mike. Good to see you. And thanks for agreeing to do this a little early.
Yeah, we're doing a little early this week, and which is good because we missed last week, so we can catch up on some of that stuff.
Yes.
In particular, the Fed. The Federal Reserve finally, pulled the trigger, 50 percentage points. What do you think? I mean, they were predicting 25, and then they said, "Oh, it's got to be 50 because the economy's worse." And then things got a little better, and everybody said, "No, maybe not. We'll go back to 25." Now it looks like 50 and maybe a couple more between the end of the year. Now and the end of the year. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to judge what's right and what's wrong, what's timely, what's mistimed with these things so far. And I realize it's just been a number of days as you and I speak. The timing seems good. Investors seem happy. Shoppers, seem happy with the larger cut because after all, remember, as high as 50 basis points in one chop feels, interest rates had gone up quite a bit to try to slow a rapidly, inflationary economy. So I think a decisive move makes sense. Looking at even sort of the trickle down effects to housing here in Silicon Valley, in 1 year, mortgage rates have gone from the high sevens to the low sixes, and we're already seeing a little more action.
Yeah, it's getting exciting again.
Yeah, and so I think this feels right so far. And again, there's no guarantee that even if you do the right thing, it will feel right in the marketplace. So time will tell, but so far it seems like the right move.
Yeah, in fact, there was some research done, I think it was by Forbes, where they compared interest rates cuts to what happened. And actually, I think it's on average, recessions came 18 months after major rate cuts. That is typically done to forestall a potential recession. But, Chairman Powell was saying, "No, we think this will guarantee a soft landing." So, I'm not sure if it actually does anything positive. It seems to be like a stopgap when things are starting to look dangerous. And there's also the fear, if you cut interest rates, unemployment can go up. You can start slowing the economy down. And we're already having kind of scary unemployment numbers right now. So it's like a real interesting balancing act, how you get both to work in synchrony.
Right. I mean, you can't pretend that economic cycles that have historically happened are going to stop happening. You
Right.
just can't. And you can, as you say, sort of forestall these things. But if the economy is going to slow down, it's going to slow down. If customers and consumers are going to pull back, they're going to pull back. And a lot of these things are lagging. We don't pull back as consumers unless and until we've been paying a lot at the grocery store. And we have. And so it's a natural thing for, say, iPhone 16 sales out of the gate to be a little slower than usual. We are a bit scarred economically as consumers, and that makes sense. And that is cyclical. And you really can't beat that back. You can fight it, but you can't defeat it.
We'll talk about the iPhone 16 in a moment. For right now, we have another interesting contradiction, which is the Dow is still setting new records. I mean, NASDAQ is kind of lagging behind, but the Dow is setting incredible new records. While simultaneously, according to the conference board, consumer confidence fell massively in September. It was 105.6 in August and fell to 98.7 in July it was 105, and now it's 106 in August. Consumers are still scared. The markets seem confident, like things are going great. The economy's back in the game and it's taking off, but consumers are like, oh, wait a minute, no, I don't trust this. If something's wrong, it's a scam, or they're going to pull the rug out from underneath us again, or whatever. Heading into a presidential election, what does that tell the average voter? I mean, are things good? Are things not good? Scary?
Well, we've known for some time that even while consumers continue to shop, they think the economy is bad.
Yeah.
In surveys, consumers say the economy is bad, but my economy is good. So there is this negativity that seems to come from somewhere, and I don't know where it is other than maybe their Twitter feed. But so far, the economy has been pretty good for a lot of people, and that remains strong. Now, are they cutting back on certain items? Yeah, that makes sense because prices have been high for a long time.
Well, so Rolls
But
Royces and Maseratis you see parked in front of Walmart.
yeah, well, and by the way, the Dow being at historic highs is impressive, but that's a different kind of shopping.
Yeah.
That's not saying I'm going to Target instead of, Whole Foods. That's saying I'm still going to pour my money and dividends and stock winnings back into the market because I've got those things. It's a different kind of consumption.
Okay. Employment. Last week we saw Cisco and IBM cut almost 1,000, almost more than 1,000 jobs. What's going on there? It's kind of interesting, the level of layoffs. Let's see, Cisco's cutting 842 jobs in the Bay Area, 563 in San Jose, et cetera, 134 in San Francisco. IBM slashing 112 jobs. And Advantest, which is a chip testing company, is chopping 88 jobs in the East Bay. There have been 16,000 jobs layoffs in the Valley since the end of the pandemic. And according to Layoffs FYI, tech has already this year seen 60,000 job cuts across 254 companies. Is this just the companies are still shedding employment after the, burst of growth after COVID? Do you think that's what's going on?
I do. But I think you also have to add in companies experimenting or even moving some of their back end facilities and workers into AI. And that is, I think, to an extent working. And so they're shedding some jobs because they can improve the bottom line. And that's going to frustrate customers. I mean, look, healthcare is something we all go through, and it's very frustrating because there aren't enough healthcare workers. I think we're going to see that with a lot of the tech that we see, where the reliance on machine learning and bots and agents, and the Mark Benioffs of the world can talk till they're blue in the face about agents doing the job, but that's not going to satisfy people who want a human connection. And that's where I'm afraid we're going. And so, yes, there's some shedding of the post-pandemic growth, but also I think there's some experimentation with these AI bots and agents. And I hope these companies, when they realize that consumers are not happy with that, are going to be willing to go back to real people.
Well, can these companies improve customer service fast enough to make up for the customer service people they lay off?
It's a great question. And the answer so far, I think historically has been no. And a big part of that is because we, on the consumer side, are not satisfied dealing with phone trees and computers and that sort of thing. And these agents are essentially that. We want human contact. We want, people to work with. And I just wonder if we're not, going to see a bit of a backlash as AI starts to take over some of these back-end functions.
Yeah, listening to people on the phone, I never hear people scream more loudly than when they get into a computer decision tree on customer service and it doesn't understand what they want. I mean, I've seen phones flung across offices, in response to that. And it's a real interesting question. It typically takes human beings, we've seen for the last 60 years, that human beings take at least 1 or 2 generations to adapt to fully to a new technology. So, you know, we don't get to, you and I, especially me, don't get to cross the Jordan because, to the other side, because the promised land of, living on computers is beyond me. But my children, the grandchildren that are coming, they live in that world. They live in cyberspace. And I wonder if interacting on a constant basis with machines, it's just not in our DNA, but we may adapt to that in another 20 or 30 years.
We may. I think an analogy of people who are, let's say, in middle age, you may get laughed at when you tell your children about what it was like to, write a check or something like that, right? On the other hand, they may listen enviously when you tell them about dealing with an actual person.
Yeah.
And, I realize that my Apple Pay works a lot better than writing a check, and I appreciate that technology. But there are times when I really miss the idea of interacting with a human being, because as you say, there's nothing more frustrating than running into a brick wall of a machine that can't get it done. And then what are you left with? You're really left without the job being done. And that's my worry about AI is it is good at some back end functions, but is it good at dealing with us humans? I just don't know.
Yeah, and no machine's going to let you go, you know what? I'll submit this check tomorrow for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's not going to be any room for, dealing with messy humanity in this new world. Okay, let's talk about the new iPhone. I read a very interesting piece that they looked at Apple's history with iPhones. The first few iPhone generations were introduced every other year. Then it slipped to 2 years, and now with the new one, it's moving out towards 3 years, 4 years. Apple seems to be slowing down, and the innovation, this author noted, also seems to be slowing down. That if you put the new one against the last generation, they're kind of indistinguishable. And there's an awful lot of people like you that wait a while and buy the last generation after they finally cut the prices. So is Apple, and one of the things they noted was that after Jony Ive left, these products have been getting slower and slower and less innovative. He left in 2017, that things are slowing down, and that Apple is almost cannibalizing itself now with these millions of people like you who are buying the previous generation once it goes on sale.
Right. So there are a lot of things to unpack there. I mean, for one thing, the buying, why buy every year a very expensive product? I would ask someone who has a lot of money why they do it. You're asking a reporter why he doesn't do it. Come on. Who also, by the way, has young people on the phone plan still, and it just adds up.
Yeah.
And do I need these incremental gains? No, I love testing them. I love telling people about the gains, but I will be the first to admit, because it's my job, these gains have become incremental. And do you need to spend $1,200 for an incremental gain in the software, in the camera? And I like a better camera as much as the next guy, but it's a lot of money for very small gains. And you mentioned Ive. The design of the iPhone has remained really similar, to the point of exactly similar, for years now. And it's a good design, as I would say that the Samsung ones are. I mean, they're even experimenting with these fold-out phones and things like that, that Apple is not. But really, if you held up your phone, it could be a 13, a 14, a 15, a 16. I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell. And I look at these things for a living. And that's a strange thing. There's something about seeing your product out in the wild that's new, that's a status thing here in Silicon Valley. You can't do that for the last few iPhones. And I wonder if that's got people a little less excited, no matter how much money you have for an incremental upgrade.
We just talked about the Samsung folding phone. Did you see that Huawei just came out with a double folding phone in China?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's enormous. In fact, a lot of these net commenters in China are creating memes now where you can walk in public and no one sees your face because this thing's all folded out. One guy took two bowls of ramen, instant ramen, and he said you can fold it open and put it over the entire top to hold the two lids down. And
I'm
they're
waiting.
using it as umbrellas. And
Right.
apparently, it's just a terrible machine because China can't do the latest generation of chips. There's apparently this is a 7 nanometer, while you get something like the iPhone is 3 nanometers. It's so much more efficient and powerful and beautiful. But it's an attempt to try to get around these American phones with something that, by the way, it also costs is 3 screens, but it costs 4 times as much. So
Well,
that's
right.
an
When
interesting logic right there on pricing.
Yeah, even the Samsung fold out phones are what, 1800 dollars. And it feels like a gimmick. Now, granted, I guess you get double the screen. I'm waiting to see one on a plane. I think I've mentioned it always kind of guts me to see someone watching a beautiful movie on a small smartphone as a cinema fan. But I guess if you doubled it, I just haven't seen them out in the wild all that much.
Yeah.
And considering what most people do on their phones, which is check your apps and text and WhatsApp and all that. Do we really need a double screen? It feels gimmicky, and it really is extra pricey, even as we as a society have accepted $1,000 smartphones. This is double that, and that feels high for a fold-out screen that I would worry about, not only not being able to put in a pocket, but snapping in two, and that would be an expensive snap.
Yeah. Well, I'll know it'll work if I see any cultural advantage to it, but I'm not seeing much of that. I think if I saw one of those, I'd kind of go, oh, okay, that's a Samsung. But I'm not sure it's like it confers, an image out there to the rest of the world out of just except novelty. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Uh, Carolyn Ellison, Sam Berkman-Fried's ex girlfriend and executive at FTX, just got sentenced to 2 years in prison. So Bankman-Fried gets 20, and she turns on him and gets 2. Is that how this works?
Um,
I'm ratting out anybody that I can if I ever get in trouble.
Well, right. I think that's why that happened, is because she turned, as so many people on FTX did. And I mean, you've seen enough movies. That's how that works. You get people to, and it was the highest ups who turned against SBF. And so, she goes for 2 years. The thing that jumped out at me was that she had to forfeit $11 billion as part of her sentence, which is a staggering amount of money.
Especially watching her. Would you trust somebody like her with $11 billion of
No, I mean,
investor
look,
money?
they were all so young,
Yeah.
other than SBF's parents, who what were they doing and how are they somehow free? But regardless of that, yeah, these were very young people dealing with a very young, crazy, speculative thing in this crypto exchange. And to say, by the way, you have to forfeit $11 billion, does that mean she had her hands on $11 billion and
Would you use Apple Pay or would you write an old-fashioned check?
all right, just double click on your phone and call it a day. I have no idea how you get that money, how you forfeit that money, where that money has been sitting during this whole thing, and if that now goes to the FTX investors who were burned so badly by the collapse.
Well, we'll see. She's probably going to serve what, 2 months?
Well,
I
there's
mean,
a
we know
limit.
that.
There's a certain limit. It's got to be like 75% or something like that. So she's in for a little bit, but much, much less than
I
FBF,
mean, I
SBF. And
remember reading Elizabeth Holmes. They took 2 years off the moment she walked in.
well, if for good behavior, right. And
Yeah.
but still the percentage has to be something around, I think, 70 or 75 or something in these cases. So she'll serve some time, but when you turn and give the cops what they want, you get time off.
Yeah. Now, have you read about these VCs? Guy named Balaji, who is talking about, he said, we start new companies like Google, we start new communities like Facebook, we start new currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Can we start new countries? He wants to create a country. What do you think?
I'm not a fan of these things. I'm just not. I think this comes with not only wealth, and it's you got to be making a lot of money to start talking about starting a country, but there's something to me that's more disturbing aside from the money. And maybe I'm unique in feeling this way, but there's something almost eugenic about this in saying we, a certain group of people, and he's talking wealthy VCs, et cetera.
I mean, he was a partner at uh, Andreessen Horowitz. I mean, this guy's a
Right.
player.
Oh, no, no. And it's players saying we want our own place. We want to call the shots. We don't want any of the riffraff. And there's just something disturbing about that. And that comes with arrogance, of course, but also you have to have really good times and a lot of money. And a lot of that is built on the backs of these people that he wants to separate from. And that disturbs me on several levels.
It
I don't
almost seems
think we
like a
need.
cult, like you're creating a cult. And
Yeah,
it's an elitist cult. Like we,
perfect.
the Illuminati, get to live here.
Right.
We'll probably bring in. Actually, it was a book a few years ago by Mike Steep at Digital Cities at Stanford. That it was a novel, but talking about how people that were connected with intelligent AI and all of this lived in central London, and everybody else who basically served those people has lived in the outside of town. They came in the morning, but they had to be out by sundown. And this kind of has that vibe about it. We're going to create a special place and we'll bring in the slaves during the day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
It actually sounds like the Middle East, some of these countries.
well, there is a I don't know, separatism to it. And if you can't live in the current society or current country, even though you're one of the elite wealthy folks, I don't know. I think count your blessings, help raise the whole society.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound too socialist or communist here or anything, but there are a lot of things you can do with money other than separate yourself and start a new country.
Yeah.
You can make your country that gave you so much better. It just seems.
Yeah, why not do that instead of having, the guillotine be brought back out for the,
Right, right.
indifferent royals? Um, Real quick, did you see the news that Elon is talking about a device connected to his brain, sensor, a device that would bring back sight? It would, and he even kind of hinted it'd be kind of like Geordi on Star Trek, where you'd have a thing across here, but you'd also be able to look beyond the visible spectrum of light available to human beings into infrared and ultraviolet and all of that. And he claims he should be able, if the optic nerve is intact, to bring sight to people who were born blind. Is this just more Elon? It's kind of intriguing. I mean, my mother-in-law taught the blind for 30 years, and I know the challenges that are faced by blind people in the modern world. That would be truly miraculous if it's real. And I always question whether it's real with Musk.
Right. And he's his own worst enemy. He is the reason you're questioning whether that's real. And that's a shame because he's obviously a great scientist capable of, making EVs and rocket ships and everything. But he is so demanding of your attention and of these crazy political statements that he is his own worst enemy and therefore can't entirely be trusted. So it would be nice if we lived in a world where someone that smart and effective and wealthy is really moving forward, but he takes so many steps back that it's hard to say, yeah, I want that guy to put a chip in my head or affect my sight. It's unfortunate that researchers and colleges and universities and people are like, hey, let's jump on board because they have to approach him with a wariness
Right.
because of
And
his
I think for
recklessness.
everybody, including us, it's believe it when you see it.
Right, right. That said, it would be nice if he went back to really focusing on science. Every time now on Twitter, he posts something about SpaceX or Tesla that's like, hey, we're going to extend battery life or fly to Mars. I just take everything with a grain of salt because the last 7 posts have been,
Yeah.
offensive and off-putting and just wildly controversial. And it's like, why? I don't know. It's just
I
a
know. Why
complex.
do that? Why not? You're saving the world, making the world a better place. Why don't you just focus on that?
Yeah.
You know? But I guess, when you get geniuses, you get genius personalities and all their eccentricities. Okay, finally, because we're going to run out of time. I read this in the New York Post. A survey of 1,000 business leaders across the United States say they are laying off Gen Z employees in large numbers because they just have concerns about their work ethic.
They're not as
We,
effective as the machines, Michael, I guess. What can you say?
are we gonna have 23-year-olds in homeless camps around America because they're unemployable, or
You
or
know,
giant coffee bars that they're all working as baristas at?
right. Look, I mean, Gen Z and all that, they have some advantages. I get that. But there are some challenges. And I think we need to take these, even those of us who are older than Gen Z, seriously. For example, if we're demanding that machines take their jobs, where are they going to go next? And how are they going to get the capital and the experience to start the next wave of companies? Because that's how companies get started.
Yeah.
Also, where they get started is a big thing. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley for one reason, and that's because young people got the funds and were able to, take their degrees and start these incredible companies that became, Google and Yahoo and all that stuff because they came here from all over the world. But also, if they can't afford to live here, no matter where they're from,
Right.
they're going to go elsewhere, and then Silicon Valley ceases to be
Well,
Silicon
let's
Valley.
go
So,
a bit further. Why should I be loyal to a company that's going to replace me with a bot or AI within not even my lifetime? It's going to be before I'm 30 years old. Why should I give my soul to that firm if they're not going to take care of me?
right, and that's an absolutely legitimate question to ask. And without some of that loyalty, it's hard to build equity. If you don't build equity, you don't have enough to then jump off and start Salesforce or whatever, right? I mean, these are people who have that opportunity as young people to succeed and fail and build equity and get experience and then create these monstrous companies that, good or bad, hired a ton of people and created a ton of wealth that built cities and communities. And if we're tossing these young people aside, we're doing it at the detriment of not only our companies, but our communities. And I worry about that very much.
Okay, well, that's the message to our younger listeners and viewers. Start working on those business plans. That that
Yeah.
may be
And
that may be your best strategy for the long term.
right. And find a place that appreciates you and a community that allows you the wherewithal to live and have that work-life balance because people want to work where they want to live. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge Silicon Valley has right now. And to find out that, bots are taking over for young workers, that's also a bad situation. I mean, you got to build the workforce that will create jobs for the next generation
Right.
of the workers.
I hope VCs and angels investors are listening to this too, because you can't build a company without those guys. And they've been playing the safe game for the last 10 years. So
Don't be seduced by the machines.
yes, don't be seduced by the machine. Okay, we run out of time. I'm not going to read the finish. Everybody knows that you're on NBC Bay Area and Facebook and Twitter, and I'm out there somewhere in Sunnyvale. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.